Welcome to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. It's wealth medicine for doctors. If you're a doctor and you have no time, it looks like you found us just in time. This podcast is for all doctors who would like to work on their personal wealth, but do not have traditional hours to do so because they have no time. We're here to jump into topics that will help you address your wealth both inside and outside of your practice so that you can live the life of significance you're dreaming of. You'll hear from your peers, you'll hear from industry professionals, and your host and wealth advisor, me, Kevin Sullivan. This is your time. Now let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to Physician Wealth Meds. It's wealth medicine for doctors is what we like to say. And I'm your host and wealth advisor, Kevin Sullivan. And we have a really great podcast for you today. This podcast is designed to provide hard-hitting and relevant financial strategies on a variety of topics. I also have to say that unless we speak with you and know your personal situation, we do not make any recommendations on the show. Our goal is to provide you great financial educational content that you can follow up on with us or our guest speakers that will help you live the financial life of significance that you've always wanted. My guest today is Dr. Tom Burns, who has carved out his financial success creating a consistent stream of cash flow through real estate investing. And I couldn't pass up this opportunity as I heard him on another podcast with Tom Wheelwright back in March. So I reached out to him and asked him if he would be a guest on my podcast, and he so graciously said yes. So where he's also a physician, I thought that you could benefit from everything he has to say today. So let me give you a brief bio on Dr. Tom Burns. He's widely known, and he has a great relationship with Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's a private equity firm called Presario Ventures, LLC, with over $300 million of assets under management. He's also the author of this book, Why Doctors Don't Get Rich, and that is a must read. His website is richdoctor.com, where you can learn more about him and his firm. And I like what you put out on your website. I just want to read a few excerpts from this. It says, after creating his own passive income and eventual freedom, Tom is now sharing his passion with doctors and building a community of wealth-minded physicians. I love that. So with over 25 years of experience, Tom is on a mission to use his experience that provided his freedom to guide you on your journey to financial independence. He has spoken to thousands of his fellow doctors on how they can create streams of passive income. And his latest book, Why Doctors Don't Get Rich, summarizes the issues that physicians face and outlines actionable plans on how you can solve your financial burden and begin the life of your choice. I like that. As an orthopedic surgeon, Tom understands where you are professionally and strives to help you find the same financial freedom that he did. He's an educator and mentor by nature who wants doctors to thrive and not burn out. So with that, I hope I gave you a good introduction here. So thank you so much, Tom, for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for being here. I hear that stuff. It always makes me sound better. Always makes me sound better than I am. But always trying to get better every day. But yeah, that's kind of the mission. So
there you go.
That.
Well, we could add another 10 pages and keep on going, probably. So I wanted you just for our doctors that are listening, just tell us about yourself and the why behind what you're doing.
Sure. I just got a wife and 2 kids, and here in Austin, Texas, kind of living life the best we can. I grew up as an athlete, and that's kind of all I did. And very soon found out that nobody was ever going to pay me for that. So I decided to become a physician and hang out with sports people. So I became an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine guy, and loved my practice. Really just retired about 2 years ago. Practiced for well over 10 years when I didn't necessarily need the money. And so, my whole goal in life has been to travel the world, grow a little bit each day, and, do the best I can to help whoever asks for it.
That's great. And I also had a follow-up question here about give us an update on what you're doing now, because I know you were just down in Panama out of the country and speaking engagements, conferences. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, and none of that was really planned, A lot of people write books as part of a business plan, and I can promise you, my friend Robert said, hey, you ought to write a book. So I did. And, with that comes a website, and then comes, people kind of connect with you. So, I don't even think my website says I'll speak for you. I think people just ask. So, yeah, I was down speaking for it's an international mastermind. People kind of came in from all over the world. It tends to move around the world. And this one was in Panama City, Panama. And we talked about, the global macroeconomy, the dollar, the dollar's reserve currency status, real estate investments. So it was, so I was down there. I was sort of me and another fellow were the sort of real estate guys to kind of help this group understand the benefits and, the ups and downs of real estate. So it was fun.
Right. I mean, that real estate is a great investment. It's definitely a way to diversify and to really be focused, because the more focused you are, the more you understand what you're doing. So right. I like that whole thought process. I know many doctors get bogged down by working in their practice with little time to focus on building their wealth outside the practice. And I've usually said that, it's that type of wealth that you build outside of your practice that's going to sustain you for generations. So give us a little insight as to why it matters that doctors take control of their financial future in this way.
Oh, you bet. And to tag on with what you said, there's a guy named Jim Rohn that said you build a living between 8 and 5. You build a life after 5 o'clock, and that's kind of what it takes sometimes. But the reason anybody, physicians or anybody, ought to at least take a look at creating a little bit of freedom is that, having control of your time and choice of what you do is rather liberating. So that's, from the selfish standpoint, that's great. I tell people you can once you get to a point where you don't have to work, you don't have to apply your time or your services to create income. It comes in whether you're sleeping, vacationing, playing with your kids, or just sitting around. Once you do that, you have choice of what to do with your time. You can grow that business bigger, whether it be your physician business or your investing business. You can just relax, travel, see the world. Or I joke, you can sit on the couch and eat Cheetos and binge Game of Thrones if you want to. You've got that choice because you don't have to use your time to produce that income. And that's our only non-renewable resource. Kids grow up fast. You always hear people that are older that will say, "I wish I'd have spent more time with my wife, more time with my husband, with my kids, et cetera." So, we're only here one time on this rock, so it's nice to be able to have some control over what we do with it and how we contribute to it.
Now, what would you say to doctors that would say, well, I just really don't have time, to do this? Because you mentioned that, you talk about that early on in your book. And I know that might be a good intro to get them to think about this whole thing.
Yeah. So it's, wealth, freedom, whatever noun you want to use, it typically starts in your mind, right? And this is not a self-help podcast, but, everything starts in your mind, how you think about things. So you could say, I don't have time. Or you could say, how do I find the time? There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of things you can do. We all have the same 24 hours. Some people do it. I was able to do it somehow, bumping into dead ends all the time. So how do I find the time? I can't afford it. How can I afford this? I make a lot of money for every surgery or patient I see. Well, maybe the other thing is I have passive income that makes it so that I don't have to spend my time to get that next dollar to come in. So it's mindset. It's mindset, Kevin.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point, because that way they can start to think as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. There's another phrase. And I love Jim Rohn, too. You just quoted Jim Rohn. Even on my website, it says the wind blows on us all, but it's the setting of the sail, right, that determines the direction. That's another one of his famous quotes. Love that. So in your book, you say that being rich is not wealth, but wealth is having a stream of passive income coming in no matter what, no matter if you can work or not. Could you touch base on that?
Yeah. You can work 80 hours a week and have a ton of money. That's better than not having money. Look, money is a great tool, and it's a lot easier to have fun, and it's a lot more fun to have money than not to have money. But it's not the only pillar that holds up a wealthy, healthy, happy life. There's your relationships, there's your physical health, there's all sorts of things like that. So if we just want to narrow it down to the money portion, are you really rich if you get paid $1,000 an hour or $10,000 an hour? Because that next 10 minutes you could get hit by a bus or you could get ill and the music stops.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe financial wealth is having assets that you control, but that bring money in without your efforts. There's a little mental effort with some of it, but if you've got money coming in that covers your expenses or covers your whole lifestyle, again, you don't have to worry. You still have to worry about getting hit by a bus, but at least if you get hit by that bus, money keeps coming in, takes care of your family, takes care of you and your medical issues. You can come up with any scenario. So that's what I consider wealth, at least on the financial side, is having assets that produce income, that give you the ability to control your time and what you do with it.
It's all about motivation too, to desire maybe to have something different than you're already doing. We see the statistics that say 25% or 1/4 of all doctors are 65 years old, and 50 to 60% are burnt out. So boy, when you put those two together, that doesn't paint a rosy picture for that. But what they can do if they had a little motivation, a little excitement to get them out there in this fashion that you're talking about, that would be super.
I can tell you, the statistics you just gave. So some people, they use the word trapped a lot. People feel trapped. I've got to go see patients today, or I've got to go do something because I've got bills. I got a mortgage. I got gas payments. My kids want to go to college, that sort of thing. It gives you this trapped feeling. Now, I loved what I did. There was a reason for that. So, I had some other things coming in on the side. And so what I suggest or I like to talk about is that, all of a sudden your job or your profession or if you're a physician, it can get a lot more fun when you don't necessarily have to go work that hard. You don't even have to replace all your income. You just replace some of it with some passive income. Takes a little pressure off, makes you smile a little bit more. Maybe you can eliminate some of the annoying things that are part of your professional life, and then it gets more fun, because I personally believe we had a great profession. I enjoyed it so much. And when you can eliminate some of the annoying things that have to do with money and how much you have to work, it gets a lot more fun. So
I like how you said in your book that you were just really excited when it started covering, let's say, your utility bill. It's like, hey, that's done. Now we can move on to something else. Oh, really? Now it's taxes? I mean, and you kept that progression. That's got to be exciting for them.
Yeah, it is. And, if you look, it's the old adage of how to eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. Or how do you climb a mountain? You take the first step. So you look up at the top of Everest or any mountain and you think, oh, that's so far away. But you take a few steps. So it's like a little game, and it keeps you engaged. And, game theory's real. It keeps people motivated. So if you can sit back and say, for instance, you know what, I covered my utilities with these couple of investments that I did that I'm doing. I'm putting none of my time to it. It's covered my utilities. That's pretty cool. Let's do that again. Let's cover the mortgage. Let's cover the grocery bill. Let's cover the clothing bill for the kids. You do that with a little bit of patience. I like to call it active patience, which is you got to realize you can't force nature, and you can't force compounding. Things like that are going to happen in their own time, but you're always doing something to add to it. Right. And so you feel like you're making progress. You don't have to take that whole big bite at once. Keeps you engaged. It gets you small wins, and small wins tend to give you motivation. And that's how I did it. I just wanted an extra $1 coming in that month that I didn't have the month before.
Could you tell us about maybe the first real estate acquisition that you did?
Absolutely.
About that and how it felt, and the whole process with it as a doctor, maybe thinking about, well, maybe I could do this. What would that first step look like?
I can promise everybody listening can do this. I knew nothing, and I was scared to death. So I started realizing I needed income outside of medicine, not correlated to medicine, in my training. And most doctors are listening to this. It was during residency, about halfway through. So I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and obviously didn't have any time. So I did what I could to learn about stuff, and landed on real estate because it moves slow. I can use partners. I can do it part-time. All that just fit the life of a busy surgeon. So I learned best I could. I got into practice, paid off a few bills. I was busted broke when I started practice, like most people are. And I had to borrow money from my patients to buy milk for my kids, that sort of thing. So I paid my parents back, paid off a few bills, had tiny student debt, nothing compared to the folks that are listening to this, paid that off. And then I did the only thing that I knew. There weren't other people's deals available for me to invest in. I just figured, okay, well, I'm going to go buy something. So I opened up the newspaper. This was a long time ago.
Mhm.
Opened up the newspaper, looked in the real estate section and found something. And I called the number, went down there. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath student condominium at the University of Texas. Excuse me. And the guy showed me the deal. And by then I had learned how to pretty much underwrite the project. Real estate's it's just simple math.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers will absolutely tell you what to do. So I put the numbers together, looked like it was going to make me some money. And I said, all right, let's buy this. What do we do? He goes, I'll put in a contract. It's awesome. So he puts in a contract. We win the deal. He says, you got it. And I said, great. What do we do next? He goes, well, you need to get an inspection. You need to line up some insurance, and you need to get a loan unless you're going to pay it cash. Well, of course, I wasn't going to pay cash. I said, that's awesome. How do I do that? He said, I know a guy that does inspections. Call your insurance guy. He'll have something, and, go get your own debt. So I knew a banker, and I called him up and said, hey, I'm buying this thing, and I'm supposed to get money from you. What do I do? And he said, well, I want, last couple of years of tax returns. I want your personal financial statement. I was like, awesome. What's that? And so my point is that I didn't know anything. I got angry because he kept asking me for receipts and tax statements and all this stuff. And eventually we got this deal. And when it was all said and done, and, I was all beat up and scared to death and finally had the project, it was making me about $150 a month. So good learning lesson. And I guess to carry it one step further, after a month or so, I thought, well, this is pretty cool. I don't have to see a patient. I get $150 no matter what I do. It comes in every month. I called him up. I said, you got any more of these? He goes, yeah, I got one down the street. So we went and looked at that one, did the same numbers, learned a few more lessons, but it happened in a lot shorter time frame, a lot less anxiety. Bought that one. Then I bought another. And so before long, I had quite a few of these, and I got so good at that market that I knew it like the back of my hand. I bought one sight unseen that I still own today. I bought one for no money down. I don't recommend that, but I happen to know more about the market than the selling broker and the seller himself. So I got it for a great deal. They wrote me a check at closing. So that's sort of that focus thing you were talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely focus. No, that's excellent. I like what you say in your book about don't fear mistakes because they give you some of life's most valuable lessons. And if there's a doctor listening that would think, well, man, what if I do make a mistake? What if something goes wrong? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always had the same thing because, look, we're physicians. We're trained to measure twice, cut once, study forever before you make that incision and you do this thing. And that's something in the investment world and learning world and personal development world, you got to kind of beat out of yourself because you're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. So I suggest one best way to try to hedge against your mistakes is to try to just learn as much as possible. Sometimes partner up with somebody that might be farther along than you. Should you choose to get into something like this first deal I did, go in small. It was small. My down payment was $16,600. It was a very small deal a long time ago, but, go in small because if you're trying to learn something, you go in small. If you lose, you're going to lose small, but the size of the lesson is going to be the same as if you went in big. So just never pass up the chance to learn a lesson. You're going to have them one way or another. And the more you learn, the better you get, the less you'll have. You'll still make more mistakes in different areas, but they won't eat you. It's just money. And typically the mistake you make where you lose some money, somewhere down the line, you're probably going to make more money because of what you learned from it. I have found that through the last 30 years. Always when something bad happens, something good comes of it. Usually not immediately, but there's usually, it usually becomes a good investment.
Right. I know with my 34-year career of doing this, I always encourage our clients to increase their financial knowledge and intelligence. There's so much out there to do. And if you get something that resonates with you, you can run with it. I know for some doctors, they see their practice as the profession that they're in, and that's just the way it is. They make a good living and enjoy some good incomes. But you mentioned that they may find themselves owning a good job rather than a valuable business. Because if the job was lost, if the income was lost, if they lost the one thing that generated the income, the position or their job, because they're working for money and money is not working for them, then that's a whole different thought process.
Right. And, and that's certainly the way it was back when I was working. We were the business. Things have changed a little. Private equity groups are buying businesses, and some practices have some significant value. That's good. And then, I would encourage everybody to kind of look at that and see what kind of value there is, how they can turn it into a business. So that maybe it's if there's so few, what is it, 25% people out there own their own practices now, but there are people out there that would like to acquire physician practices, which is why 74% or whatever are working for somebody else now. So it can be a business. But if if that's not an option for you, number one, there's nothing wrong with being a good doc, enjoying life, and we make a good bit of money. That's some listener might say, well, not me. And I think a lot of docs are not paid what they're worth, but we make a wonderful professional salary, and certainly you can live off that. And there's a lot of people in the world who won't feel sorry for us. So there's nothing wrong with enjoying being a physician. I loved it. I just happened to have something extra that made it even more fun. But if you want to make a change, you've got to, Einstein, I forget some quote that, about doing the same thing, expecting a different result and doing the same thing. That was Einstein, right? So you got to do something different, and different is usually scary, and it usually requires, bumping your head a few times and making some mistakes. But I can tell you the rewards are fabulous.
Yes. And a crossover quote from Warren Buffett: if you don't find a way to make money when you sleep, you'll work until you die. That's right. These are things I hear in my industry too, it's kind of interesting to see that. I love what you said about you're not going to get to the point where you retire. You're just going to continue the mission. Yep. That's powerful. See, I was telling you had some great one-liners in your book. But they're so thought-provoking that you're not going to retire. You just continue the mission because you've got the mission of what you would like to do from a cash flow perspective, and it just provides the freedom that I think everybody would like to see. Yeah.
Rarely did anybody listen to this podcast get into medicine for the money. Some might have, but most of us have some sort of story why we wanted to wear that white coat, right? And so that's sort of mission-based to begin with. And so retire, I don't necessarily like the word from retirement, maybe, transition from medicine or transition into something else in addition to medicine. But we've all got some sort of mission in life. It's not necessarily just to take up oxygen. We would like to contribute something back to the world. There's a book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain. Mountain number one is that acquisition mountain, right? We're all fighting to get what we need to, E.F. Hutton says that's, we're fighting to get our number or whatever, wherever we want to get financially. That's mountain number one. Once you sort of finish that acquisition mountain, as you get near the top, you see mountain number two, which is a mountain of contribution. And there's a lot of benefits and a lot of rewards to giving back. And so that's essentially actually what pulled me out of medicine, because I loved what I was doing, but I just kind of ran out of time to be a doctor. And so if we can somehow impact others and make the world a little better place, even if it's on a small scale, then we've done something good.
Oh, that's it. That way you can live the life of significance that you're always looking to do. Right. And there's so much joy and pleasure in giving back and having a say in that, in choosing the spots where you like to give back.
Right. Oh, I couldn't agree more.
That's it. So what's the timeline look for a doctor that might want to start doing this?
I always tell everybody my crystal ball is super cloudy.
Yeah.
But it took me about 10 years, and it was, there were booms and busts in that time, right? We had 9/11, and we had, the kind of downturn in the GFC and all that stuff. So, but it took about 10 years because, my goal again was just creating passive income. I read Robert's book in 97, and there's this little box there. There's the income statement and balance sheet. And I looked at if you put something in the asset column in the balance sheet, it provides money up for the income statements. All I was trying to do was put stuff in the asset column. I didn't care what it was. It could be real estate or something else. If it produced money, I did it. So I didn't have a timeline because I didn't know how long this stuff took, but it took about 10 years, and it just percolated along. Every time income came into the entities that I used for investment, which is separate from your personal doctor thing, you definitely want to separate that stuff, or I suggest it. I never spent that. So I allowed it to accumulate. And eventually, my investments started making babies, right? I was making extra money as a doctor, I'd put that in the investment pile, but then the investment pile was growing on its own. So where I could have bought one investment with my doctor money, eventually I got to where I could buy two, and then where I could buy more. So that took time, didn't change my life much. And for you doctors out there, there was a time period where, I worked as an orthopedic surgeon. So I call it 10 half days a week, right? Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
2 half days a week. And then, the call stuff too. So the first thing I eliminated was call. So I always tell people I eliminated my call schedule before the 2000s, and so that was nice. So I didn't have to leave my family in the middle of the night. The next thing I got rid of, and I wasn't swimming in money, it just felt better. I felt a little looser. I eliminated a Friday afternoon office. I would operate on Friday mornings, finish your surgeries. You feel pretty good as a surgeon. Yeah, I did some good. And then you think, oh, crap, I got office, And I was young Dr. Burns. So everybody knew I was there. So I joked that my block time, which is your surgery time, I joked that my block time was at 5 p.m. on Friday afternoons because I had emergencies all the time. Yeah. So I eliminated that. Small little thing. So I'm still working 4.5 days out of 5. Now no call. But all of a sudden I had a 2.5 day weekend. Doesn't seem like a big deal to some people. It was huge. I was like King Tut, I was Bill Gates. I had 2.5 days off and I could go do stuff. So little bitty moves like that. And then about 10 years later, I knew my numbers in my heart, in my head, because I looked at them all the time. And all of a sudden I realized my passive income had pretty much eclipsed my expenses. And it was a nice day. It was kind of liberating. I pretty much just kept practicing, but it happened. So that was 10 years. Now, it can be done faster. It can take longer. You try to increase your returns. Certainly you do that with your education. You can also change your risk profile. As you change your risk profile, you'll have more losses possibly. You got to be ready for that. Been there, done that, right? So I think it can be done faster. I think you have to be actively patient, like I said before, and just keep adding to your pile of stuff or assets that create income for you.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you to cast the vision so that people would have a good insight as to what they're doing, but you're doing a great job without me even asking that question. So what it would look like for a doctor on the other side to say, hey, we're going to do this one step at a time. And then you're going to look back over your shoulder and you're going to say, wow, I can't believe where we are versus what I was thinking maybe 5 years ago, kind of thing.
100%. You don't have to look at the top of that mountain and think, oh, I'm not there yet. Right.
Right.
Peter Drucker says we overestimate what we can do in a year. We underestimate what we can do in 5 years. So you just have to keep at it. Keep looking back. There's another thing that I would tell you. I'm like a encyclopedia of books, but there's a book out there by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy called The Gap in the Game. So you've got this mountain you want to climb, which is let's say it's your financial independence. If you wait until you get all the way to the top to feel like to feel proud of yourself or happy or loosen up, then that's going to be a long trudge, right? So if you think I want to do something, I want to reach, the top of the mountain in 5 years, 10 years. Well, if the time comes up and you're only 60% up the mountain, you could have the thought process. You could have gap thinking, which is like, crap, I didn't make it to the top of the mountain. Or gain thinking is the fact that you can look back, like you just said, and say, you know what, I am 60% better than I was before. I'm getting there. I'm really pleased with what I've done. And life changes. You should be smiling more if you're 60% there. So you want to have those wins.
Yeah, not where I want to be, but I'm not where I was. And somewhere that process still keeps on going. I think it was Jim Rohn, excuse me, I don't know if it was him specifically, but he says, I'm working part-time on my fortune and full-time on my job. He said the story was so good that by the time I started making more on my fortune than I did in my job, he said, I didn't want to lose that story. But there came that time, just like you, where your passive income was overtaking what you were earning in your medical practice. So that's a great spot to be in.
Yeah. And it can be done. And that's like, because they look at people up on stage or people on podcasts like, oh, I could never do that. That's why I said, I promise. I had no help, made a lot of mistakes, and somehow through the grace of God still got there. And so it can be done. And if you, like anything with goals, if you break it down into smaller steps, small wins, they add up over time and you'll reach your destination.
Excellent. I appreciate your time today. Do you have any follow-up or final comments you'd like to say today to anyone who's listening?
I tell that book, it's kind of written for everybody, but I sort of directed it at doctors, and it's just designed for hope and guidance. And that's the only reason I wrote it, and all this other stuff came afterwards. But you can do it. There are resources out there that can help. You just got to, start with figuring out why you want to do this. It might be it's to get the money, but there's something underlying that money. There's something that you want. You either want to be free from medicine or free to practice it how you like, or free to travel the world or spend time with your kids. That's really what's going to drive you. So when times are down, that's what'll pull you to your success. And so it absolutely can be done. And hopefully there's a little guidance in the book that'll help folks. I'm always happy to help myself.
Excellent. We've been talking to Dr. Tom Burns. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for writing the book. It's a great read. I can say myself. And I just hope that everyone that's listening today will get something about this. Would you like to provide any kind of contact information, or how do you want to close it out for that?
Yeah, you bet. They can go to richdoctor.com. And there's some free resources on there. We're jumbling some stuff up, but there's some things that have helped me over the past 30 years. It's free. It's yours. I've got a newsletter that I put out every couple of weeks when I'm not traveling, and it's hopefully got some good things to kind of help folks. And if anybody has read the book and it struck a chord with you, good or bad, I'll take either. Feel free to send me an email to hello@richdoctor.com, and I get those emails, and I'll absolutely answer you and answer questions, or, pat myself on the back if you say something nice about the book.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that. Great read. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it today, and look forward to maybe speaking with you again sometime.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Tom Burns is not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Physician Wealth Meds. Securities and advisory services are offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. That's our podcast for today. And remember, if you're not working on your personal wealth, who is? Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Any questions about what you heard today, please send an email to kdsullivan@lpl.com. Physician Wealth Meds, wealth medicine for doctors.